Please be seated. Honourable members, the first item on the order paper is a motion in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. The Honourable the Chief Whip.
House Chair, I move that the House suspends Rule 25-253(1), which provides inter alia that the debate on the second reading of a bill may not commence before at least 3 working days have elapsed since the committee's report was tabled, for the purposes of conducting the second reading debate on the Appropriation Bill in this National Assembly. I so move.
I now put the motion. Are there any objections? No objections. Agreed to. The Secretary will read the first order.
Consideration of second report of Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interests.
I now recognize the Honourable the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
House Chair, I will request that this House returns this report of the committee back to the committee for further consideration.
The motion is that the report be referred back to the Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interests for further consideration and report. Are there any objections? No objections. Agreed to. The Secretary will read the second order.
Consideration of report of Standing Committee on Finance on Financial Intelligence Center Amendment Bill.
I now recognize the Honourable the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
House Chair, I move that the report be adopted by this House.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? No objections. Agreed to. The Secretary will read the third order.
Second reading debate, Financial Intelligence Center Amendment Bill.
Honourable Chief Whip of the Majority Party, I'm waiting to have the first ANC speaker, the Honourable Khoza. Honourable Chief Whip.
We are dealing with it. Thank you very much, House Chair. Our apologies for the confusion. She's new in the committee.
The first speaker then is the Honourable Karim.
The Chair, comrades and colleagues, at least you have a more attractive person to deal with right now than Dr. Makosi Khoza, so if that's of any relief. Basically, I was hoping to respond at the end of this debate after having heard what others have said. But as it happens, I have to speak
Order,
now.
Honourable members.
And what is unparliamentary?
Honourable Karim, will you just continue? Honourable members, we are busy with the debate. Can we continue, please?
Fine. Now, this bill, as Makosi Khoza will explain, and Thandi Tobias Pokola, deals with attending to strengthening our combating of financial crime and terrorist financing.
Order, Honourable members.
Deals with ensuring that those who are involved in human trafficking or drug trafficking are dealt with far more actively and far more stringently in terms of the law than has been the case until now. The government has committed itself from 2009 onwards to deal with this issue through the Financial Action Task Force, which interestingly, the former member of this House, Kader Asmal, and former minister chaired in 2005 and 2006. And we have, through our engagement in the United Nations Anti-Corruption Convention, also committed ourselves to attending to these matters. Now, when we passed the Financial Intelligence Center Act, the original act in 2001, we actually were quite advanced. But as it happened, we hadn't anticipated the full implications of 9/11 and how we'll have to combat more actively terrorism financing. Nor did we fully understand the extent to which our country may be used for the financing of drug trafficking and human trafficking. And so it is that when the evaluation was done by the Financial Action Task Force of the OECD in 2009, they found that South Africa was lagging behind the international standards and requirements in terms of legislation. Now, as you know, our financial system is very globalized now. And whatever we do in our own country is also substantially influenced by the global financial system. And so, for example, banks that are based in South Africa also have connections with banks, for example, in the UK. If you take the example of Standard Bank and you take the example of Barclays Bank involvement in ABSA. So the regulator in those countries act very, very harshly on the banks in South Africa that do not abide by the international norms. Also, if we do not implement what we're seeking to do through this bill, it also affects trade and investment, and certain countries and businesses in those countries are reluctant to engage with countries that have not met these minimum standards. When we got the bill before us, we had extensive public hearings, and amongst the issues that were raised in the public hearings were the following. One, that various stakeholders claimed that National Treasury did not consult adequately with them. Secondly, that there's a need for a national risk assessment. Thirdly, the bill, they said, was too prescriptive and defeated the risk-based approach it sought to introduce. Fourthly, the requirements for ongoing due diligence were onerous, especially with single transactions or prospective clients who may well decide not to continue with a business relationship with an institution. There should be a transaction exemption amount for a single transaction, they said. The definition of a politically exposed person in the bill is wider, they argued, than the international standard requires, and includes a prominent person in the private sector. This would be difficult to implement without a list of prominent persons in the private sector who undertake business with government. The bill, they said, moreover, has a one-size-fits-all approach that doesn't take into account the wide differences in the scope, nature, services, and structure of the different sections of the financial sector. The definition of client, moreover, they said, may result in unintended consequences in some sectors, such as the attorney's profession and the casino industry. A number of the updated FATF standards and recommendations underpinning the bill, they argued, are relatively new, and it's not clear how they will be implemented. Sufficient account, they argued, was not taken of the costs and complexity of implementing some of the provisions of the bill. There should be a provision, they said in the bill, that provides for a consultative process with the public and industry, especially with regard to exemptions, directives, and regulations. Our responses were to say that, firstly, we recognize there's an urgent need to combat financial crime, terrorism financing, and other related crimes more effectively. And the aims of the bill we fully supported. It is recognized, however, we said, that it will be difficult to implement such a comprehensive bill overnight, Minister, and there's a need to take account of the diversity of the financial sector. The committee proposed, therefore, that these challenges be dealt with through phasing in aspects of the bill, providing for exemptions of the sectors of the industry, and ensuring more effective regulations, directives, and guidance notes. The Minister and direction of FICA will facilitate the amendments to the bill, Amendments to the bill will also provide for regular consultation with relevant stakeholders on these issues. Some flexibility was introduced on certain provisions along the lines of comply or explain why you can't principle. The committee accepted the difficulties National Treasury presented in finalizing a national risk assessment and agrees that this not be done before the adoption of the bill, and that the institution's specific risk-based frameworks can address the key relevant issues. However, the committee believes that National Treasury, together with other relevant government departments, should seek to finalize the national risk assessment within a reasonable time frame. The definition of prospective client was removed from the bill and left to institutions to determine in their risk management and compliance programs when a person becomes a prospective client. Due diligence measures for identifying the beneficial owner of legal persons were also made less onerous by clearly providing for incremental or cascading steps. The Minister will by regulation decide a threshold on a single transaction below which there will be a less onerous due diligence on the client and no ongoing due diligence. The Minister of Finance will delay the effective date of those provisions relating to the private sector prominent influential persons until government makes such a list available. However, the current unavailability of such a list should not deter institutions from undertaking their own risk profile of their clients and undertaking their own due diligence. National Treasury agreed that the compliance costs will be continually assessed and monitored with the industry. Parliament will receive a report on the implementation of this bill at least once a year. Now, the committee acknowledges that a large number of investigative authorities which could have access to information in the possession of the Financial Intelligence Center, their information, therefore raising the question of possible abuse, especially if some of these institutions are highly politicized. The Center is urged, therefore, to share this information that it has in a responsible manner with the strictest conformity with the law. While the fight against financial crime must be intensified, it is important not to abuse people's right to privacy. We want to say that this bill is especially important. All of us are committed to combating crime and terrorism financing. And we hope that all parties in this House will support this bill. It's long overdue, it's highly necessary, it's crucially important to our struggle and combat against crime, and we look forward to this House fully supporting this bill. Thank you indeed.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Mania.
Thank you, Chairperson. I wish to extend a welcome to my honourable colleague who has just arrived in the House. 9 minutes, it seems, too late. I think this is called an FTP in sport, a failure to pitch. Now, the Financial Intelligence Centre is responsible for investigating money laundering in South Africa, and the Financial Intelligence Centre Amendment Bill will enhance the fight against money laundering. Which brings us to a question that has remained unanswered for too long. Is the Financial Intelligence Centre investigating the allegations surrounding the Guptas? The question is more urgent now than it was 2 weeks ago, because reports suggesting that the Guptas may have purchased a 445 million rand mansion in Dubai have reinforced concerns that the Guptas may have illegally moved assets, including large amounts of cash, out of South Africa. Now, I wrote to the director of the Financial Intelligence Centre, Murray Michel, on the 15th of April 2016, requesting him to investigate the allegations surrounding the Guptas. At the time, there was grave concern that the Guptas had left South Africa and their money had illegally followed them or was about to illegally follow them out of South Africa. To have sat back and done nothing would have amounted to allowing the accused to flee the crime scene with the proceeds of the crime. Replying to my request for the investigation, the director said, "The matter you have raised will be considered in terms of the powers and responsibilities of the Financial Intelligence Centre." The reply was evidently designed to obfuscate rather than illuminate. I've now written back to the director requesting him to confirm that an investigation, in fact, has been launched into the allegations surrounding the Guptas. I cannot understand why the Financial Intelligence Centre is undermining public trust in itself by remaining silent on this matter. Now, I've put the question to the Minister once, and I'm going to put the question to the Minister again. Will the Minister tell us whether, following my request for an investigation on the 15th of April 2016, the Financial Intelligence Centre will be investigating allegations that the Guptas illegally removed assets, including large amounts of cash from South Africa? A simple yes or no will stop the bleeding and stop the zigzagging and obfuscation surrounding the Financial Intelligence Center and my request for an investigation into the allegations surrounding the Guptas. A simple yes or no, Minister, will suffice. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Estreisen.
Thank you, Chairperson. I deliver this debate on behalf of the IFP member of this portfolio, the Honourable S.J. Nkomo. This bill serves to enable and protect the integrity of South Africa's financial systems. As a country, South Africa has a long-standing commitment to combat illicit financial activities and improve and strengthen the security of such illegal activities. Financial institutions must also, in this process, be assisted to explore more innovative ways of offering financial services to a broader range of customers that could bring previously excluded sectors of society into the system, or rather the formal economy. This bill demonstrates South Africa's commitment to improve our systems of combating money laundering and the financing of illegal operations, and aims to report as such to the Financial Action Task Force next month, as failure can be risky to our financial stability or at worst lead to isolation and exclusion from the global financial system. This bill, if enacted into law, will further enhance this country's ability to combat financial crimes, as well as strengthen and further stabilize our financial systems. This 2015 amendment provides financial institutions with the flexibility to decide how they verify their client's identity, as not all circumstances or clients can be treated as the same. In short, it would simplify the existing rules-based system on financial compliance. Banks, on the other hand, find the provision in the FIC Bill which requires the banks give special scrutiny to political influential individuals as a cause of concern, as it's still unclear how this would be implemented. In this respect, the Financial Intelligence Center should provide guidance to all accountable institutions, not only banks. Sanctions have to be proportional to the seriousness and size and nature of the firm, as the administrative sanctions now incorporated into the amendment bill can be imposed for as an act of non-compliance, and the consequences thereof may be of such a nature that a client or firm may not be able to continue to operate. The IFP is of the opinion that the proposed legislation is in the best interest of South Africa and supportable as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is Honourable Kwankwa.
Thank you, House Chair and honourable members. The United Democratic Movement supports the bill. We agree entirely with Honourable David Menir that we can't be talking about trying to fight money laundering and tightening our laws, but we actually turn a blind eye to the reports and the allegations that are in the media about the Guptas having shipped money out of the country. Sizakuba nengxaki. Inyanzo emsulwa. Okanye sayiba sonke nathi imali isiphume singenziwa nix. The same way that you have people who accuse people of violating the constitution, but bayabagxotha babe nabo beyiviolateile behleli. But I think what is more important, I think we should commend you here, Chairperson, for the role you played in ensuring that National Treasury deepens consultation and that all stakeholders were brought on board in all the various amendments that needed to be made to this bill. But during this election period, I think there's a point that was made in particular by the Chairperson more towards the end of his contribution, that, for instance, this center ezaba access to information yabantu, information enhloni, information esizama ukuthi siyifihle ingaveli kumuntu wonke, ufumanise ukuthi izawusetyenziswa ngoku ngendlela engahlambulukanga yezopolitiko. Kufuneka ibe kanti siyayikhusela loo nto over and above ukuzama uqinisa amaqhele okulwa urhwaphilizo, amaqhele okulwa money laundering and corruption. So indeed we support it and say okubalulekileyo futhi is to ensure that banks zona nazo ziyakhuthaza uba zibe ne-innovative ways of helping in this fight against money laundering. I know, for instance, sometimes it's a tick box approach as an ex-banker, especially in the financial services industry. It's just a tick box approach, but sometimes there's no vigilance about what happens and what transactions to flag and so on and so forth. So I think banks have an important role to play as stakeholders, as a key stakeholder in ensuring that we're able to make sure that all the people who launder money are brought to book. I thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Before I call the next speaker, may I just ask members to keep the noise levels in the House down, please? It's very difficult to follow what the speakers are saying if we continue with these loud private discussions. If it's so important, leave the House and conduct it outside, please. I also wish to welcome back into the House the leader of the NFP and the Deputy Minister of Science and Technology. After an absence, welcome back. The next speaker is the Honourable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Ministers present, and Honourable Members of this House. The National Freedom Party welcomes and supports the Financial Intelligence Centre Amendment Bill tabled here today. The bill is primarily aimed at establishing a stronger regulatory framework to combat money laundering and financing of terrorism, which we believe will align South African legislation with international best practice. In addition, the bill also aims to extend the objectives of the Financial Intelligence Centre to mete out financial sanctions and to strengthen accountable institutions by adopting a risk-based approach to money laundering and financing terrorism. The National Freedom Party is particularly pleased by the inclusion of the terms and descriptions of beneficial ownership and prominent persons. We believe that these two provisions will assist accountable institutions to improve their responsibility to ensure customer due diligence measures. Chairperson, effective measures to combat money laundering in South Africa is a necessity. No society can tolerate a situation where criminals hide or disguise the proceeds of their crimes so that they appear to have originated from a legitimate source, and then use such property which is the benefit received from their crime without suspicion or detection. Moreover, no society can allow its financial institutions to channel money to fund terror on civilians, regardless of where such terror is unleashed and for whatever cause. As a country, we have a moral duty based on our respect for human rights not to aid and abet the funding of terror. And the bill tabled here today aims to strengthen our institutions to combat this international scourge of funding terrorism. Whilst the amendments tabled in the bill are welcome, the National Freedom Party is somewhat concerned that no attention has been given to the regulation of mobile money in the bill. Chairperson, mobile money is currently experiencing a revival in South Africa, such as, for example, the recent relaunch of M-Pesa and e-wallet, which is now firmly established. The recent development in mobile money can be attributed, at least in part, to the increasing market penetration level of mobile connections in South Africa. And with the expected growth in this sector, the potential for money laundering grows exponentially. Our concern is that insufficient provision has been made to extend the regulatory framework to this emerging arena of money exchange, particularly so since it can circumvent legislation dealing with account holders, as recipients of mobile money need not be bank account holders at all. In conclusion, despite the limitations which we have touched upon, the National Freedom Party welcomes the amendments contained in this bill. We accept that legislation to combat money laundering and financing of terror will need constant adjustment and judgment, and we will support all legislative effort that will take the fight to the criminals and terrorists in this regard. We support this. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Tobias.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Honourable Members, good morning. Let me take this opportunity to dedicate my speech to the women and men all over the world who had to leave their homes to go find peace and better life in foreign countries. But above all, I dedicate it to the people of Sudan who still undergo challenges and wish our Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, well in his endeavors to resolve the impasse. Also allow me to refer to the African proverb when it says, if you want to run fast, do it alone. But if you want to go far, do it together. I'm referring to this African proverb, having observed the semantics of a blame game that has been taking place in this honorable chamber, and lest we forget, we should share a common destiny and as humanity to be able to achieve better life. Therefore, I'm making a plea to our honorable members to build our strategic objective, that of building an unracial, non-sexist, prosperous, and united South Africa. Because if we are united, Africa will indeed prosper. Honorable members, I don't understand the sudden obsession by Honorable David Mania on the Guptas, as this legislation suggested by the African National Congress is comprehensive in addressing the conduct of important influential persons. Guess what?
Welcome.
I didn't even imagine that today Honorable David Mania will participate, as he said nothing, totally nothing in our meeting. So it's given polemics, semantics, gallery, everything, because there's camera, that's okay. But I can't be diverted from the content issues. I can't respond to allegations because we know, Honorable Ngwangwa, if there is evidence beyond reasonable doubt about any influential, important persons in society, we need to approach the courts. This accountability, honorable members, today is brought by the African National Congress. No one else has ever suggested reforms. So don't be misled by information peddlers. And today we are debating the Financial Intelligence Center Amendment Bill of 2015, a piece of legislation that will reach out to the untouchables or the Al Capones of the world. Let me make it clear from the onset. The object of the bill is not to conduct criminal investigations, as that is done by the criminal justice system. It is intended to measure compliance, and I need to repeat this. It is intended to measure compliance by our financial institutions, meaning banks. Lots of criminal activities has been taking place all over the world. Acts such as money laundering, terrorism financing, proliferation of weapons of mass destructions, illicit activities, and the list goes on. South Africa, as a member of the Financial Action Task Force, known as FATF in short, is one of the founding members of this important task force to deal with money laundering. This is an independent intergovernmental body all over the world, and it has committed itself to fight the above listed economic challenges that I mentioned, and will do so by strengthening compliance and helping financial institutions in observing due diligence when dealing with clients' day-to-day transactions. Ka bokgutshwanyane, ke tla hlalosa hore molaokakanyo ona o tafoleng ya ntlo ena o etsetswa ho thusa dibanka tsa Afrika Borwa ho lwantsha bobodu, bosenyi le boferekanyi. Ha motho a tsetela tjhelete ya hae bankeng, haeba tjhelete eo e amana le bobodu kapa na boferekanyi, banka e tshwanetse ho ela hloko le ho porota motho eo ho Financial Intelligence Center. Eba yona e fetisetsa taba e jwalo sepoleseng. Ha o sa hlola ho ba le tjhelete e kenang kapa e tswang ka bokunyata mona naheng ya Afrika Borwa, maqitolo a tla lahlelwa ntlwana tshwana. One other important aspect of this piece of legislation is the definitions. For example, influential persons of the likes of presidents, ministers, leaders of political parties, and all other important prominent individuals and their relationships with current and ex-spouses will be included in the scope of information and definitions needed, and this will be done taking into account our own domestic environment. I repeat, taking into account our own domestic environment. Ha ke tea mohlala, ha o sa tla hlola ho ba le batho ba tsetelang tjhelete mafatsheng a mang. Ka hoo ke bolela ba sa hlola ba patla tjhelete ba e tlosa mafatsheng a bona. Ba sebedisa mabitso a fosahetseng kapa hona ho fetisa tjhelete e ntshetsang ntwa le boferekanyi. Re a tseba hona le batho ba bulang mabenkele mona Afrika Borwa. E re ha ba se ba entse tjhelete, eba ba sebedisa tjhelete ho reka dibitsa tsa ntwa. Ha nke re bua ka bona mona. ke nywe Guptas every day. Huna le batho ba teng mona ba iketsang ekare ke borakgwebo botlana kante ba tlo reka dibetsa ba itukisisa ntwa ha re bueng ka batho ba jwale hape hona le batho ba tshwereng ditulo tsa bohlokwa setjhabeng jwalo ka dipresidente le marena le boradipolotiki ba tlang ho hlaloswa tokomaneng ba hlalositswe ha ke tsebe ntate ona o bua ka eng ya ditlhaloso ho ha ho bolele hore ho thwe ke ba belaellwa ke kopa ho hlalosa ka Sesotho hona ha ho bolele hore thwe ke ba belaellwa deputy president ha o le rakgwebo jwalo ka wena ha o mo belaellwa deputy president molao ha o no ho belaella ka ntle ho lebaka ntho ena e batlang re etse ka jore ke re bera e etse. But above all this, the legislation will address the constitutional gaps found by the Constitutional Court in 2014. That's what they forget. We are addressing the gaps that were found in relation to search warrants. We are not reinventing the wheel. They happened in the past where certain government institutions will conduct search warrants without getting authorization from the courts. So this gives precedence of having to conduct your business in a respectable and in a respectable manner with integrity. You can't just jolo ka mapolisa apartheid ba ne ba ra menyako ba kena fela ba secha ba sa botsa le ho botsa ka jeko o tla etsa ka semolao modula studio hlomphang ha re ntse re seka sekana le molawana ona ke ile ka kgahlwa ke diphehiso tse entsweng ke setho sa setjhaba se bitswa Mentombi Zonke Nyamane mme Nyamane ke mong wa ditho tsa setjhaba a latellang dipuisano tse nkang sebaka komiting ya rona ya tsa ditjhelete ka lihlo le ntjhotjho o tlile ho public hearing ya rona a ipatalletse sefofane ebile a ipatalletse madulo ho tloha ho la Gauteng mme Nyamane strongly felt that South Africa should align its laws to international standards. Furthermore, she believed that members of FATF needed to have access to information stored in South Africa for probing of prominent influential persons. Ho bolelang hore mokgatlo wa FATF o tla kena o shebe batho ba Afrika Borwa mona ke ka ho very soon will be dealing with the Panama Papers. Honorable Chairperson, it is also important to note concerns raised by stakeholders in the financial sector. For example, having listened to the casino
Honourable
industry.
Member, your time is now expired.
I thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honourable Lees.
Honourable Chair, despite the somewhat over-the-top remarks about my colleague David Mania, it is indeed happy to see Honourable Tandi back with us today. We were concerned about your health yesterday, but it's good to see you with us. Now, with regard to the question of the Guptas, if it is indeed something that is concerning to the Honourable Mania, then it's something that strangely even concerns the Honourable Ntembo, the Chief Whip of Parliament, because I see on Facebook he's made a few comments about the Guptas as well. So I don't think it's something that's peculiar to our colleague Honourable Mania, and in fact I raised a question about the Guptas yesterday in committee. So I think it's something that is fairly serious and the country as a whole is looking at. Honourable Chair, corruption in South Africa is endemic, and it makes for very fertile ground for money laundering and for financial terrorism. The Financial Intelligence Centre needs to play a role with suspicious transactions. These can only be dealt with if they are reported to it and if the person involved in these transactions can be identified. This leads to the very painful experience all of us, most of us being completely innocent of corruption, have to go through to be FIC'd with banks and others. South Africa is and has to be a part of the global economy and thus be able to trade internationally. To do this, international requirements for fighting corruption and financial crime in particular must be complied with. These include, amongst others, the United Nations Security Council resolutions on freezing of assets. One of the international requirements is an increased surveillance of politically exposed persons, PEPs. However, the South African bill refers to prominent influential persons, PIPs. Now, I'm not sure what PIP in the colloquial sense, but it sounds awfully like a guava PIP or a Nachi PIP or something else, but it includes non-politicians and thus does not strictly comply with the international requirements. No matter who is included, this will mean that those who fall into this grouping will have to be super FIC'd. And yet, there is no definitive way for accountable institutions such as banks to identify who is or who is not a PIP. There can be no doubt that all politicians are PIPs. And it's something that perhaps one or two of our presiding officers will rule unparliamentary. However, we are PIPs, and so it will make the chances of politicians being exposed when they get involved in corruption far more likely. As always, the success of this bill lies in its application by both the FIC as well as the police and justice agencies. Time will tell whether this will happen. As to date, the FIC has received nearly 300,000 reports of suspicious transactions, and only very few have led to successful prosecutions. One amendment that did not find favor in committee was the scope of the bill to be restricted to national departments in place of organs of state. Organs of state has been retained, which means that even the Johannesburg Zoo is now included in the scope of the bill. The bill also deals with the Constitutional Court ruling that the warrantless searches allowed by the FIC Act were unconstitutional. This correction to the undermining of constitutional rights is a massive victory for all South Africans. Honourable Chair, let no one say that there are no costs associated with legislation such as this one. The loss of investment funds for the creation of new wealth, for economic growth, and for job creation is enormous. The DA therefore supports the changes from a rules-based approach to one based on risk analysis. This change can, if the accountable institutions themselves are not completely risk-averse, result in less costly and less onerous FICA burden on the majority of innocent South Africans. The FIC Act and this amendment suck resources into a bureaucracy
Honourable
and
Member, your time
administration
is now expired.
that has massive costs to be paid. The bottom line is that the FIC plays an important role
Honourable Member,
in combating
your time has
endemic
expired.
corruption that we face in South Africa today.
The next speaker is the Honourable Kosa.
Honorable House Chair, allow me to emphasize that we need not be sensational when considering the importance of this bill. South Africa, under the ANC-led government, has had to tighten its regulatory framework against the loss of over estimated 15 trillion in the last 50 years, and an estimated loss of over 750 billion annually in the African continent as a result of illicit financial outflows. These statistics, members, are conservative, as they are obtained from the IMF Direction of Trade Statistics. They could be more. These figures exclude intangibles such as proceeds of corruption, drug trafficking, people and arms trafficking, etc. This May 2016 being the Africa Month, the cost of illicit outflows happens at the backdrop of the increasing number of Africans living in abject poverty. By 2010, the UN estimated that 414 million Africans live on less than $1.25 a day. The Africa Development estimates that Africa needs an additional 50 billion needs 50 billion to finance infrastructure backlog in Africa. Therefore, Chairperson, we felt strongly that we needed to make sure that this bill is fast-tracked because it's been there since 2009, and it actually undermines our agenda to prosper all South Africans. And as such, we are calling on all South Africans to align themselves with the African Union's slogan of preventing capital outflows, which is track it, stop it, get it. Chairperson, in considering the Financial Intelligence Center Amendment Bill, the Committee on Finance had to confront the reality that South Africa operates in an open economy, international finance space. Chairperson, it is very important for all members to understand that we have to stop the illicit outflows. We have to ensure that we stop all leakages to the public purse. The African National Congress-led government subscribes to the lateral laws of progress, revolution of thought, prosperity for all, and most importantly, global integration and alignment in order to confront and defeat the ends of injustice which threaten our public purse. In 2003, South Africa joined the Financial Action Task Force after enacting a Financial Intelligence Center number 38 of 2001. We had to benchmark ourselves against the best in the world as we realized fighting corruption, money laundering, financial terrorism, and illicit financial flows requires a strength of global force. Chairperson, the bill addresses the following areas which have already been covered by members, and I'm glad that all the political parties generally accepted the importance of this bill, notwithstanding some of the lamentations and so forth. Chairperson, these are the areas that the bill addresses: enhancing the customer due diligence requirement for accountable institutions, thus making suspicious transactions detectable and dealt with accordingly. Therefore, members and South Africans at large, we are inviting you to comply when requested by banks and other legitimate institutions to provide the proof of address and when asked questions relating to beneficial owner, because this is actually in the best interest of us as a whole. Institutions are now compelled by this very law to stringently perform due diligence on customers and continuously monitor transactions. This legislation adopts institutions such as banks, the entire financial sector, estate agencies, legal, accounting firms, and many other firms that are potential conduit of illicit financial flows, and to ensure that records are kept and continuously, and we monitor continuously all transactions. The bill provides for the adoption of risk-based approach to customer due diligence. Members, we have to understand that banks at times, they are going to be doing things that we may not like, because sometimes they will have to freeze our own assets if they have grounds to suspect that we are involved in some kind of money laundering or illicit financial flows. This bill, members, removes reference to Counter Money Laundering Advisory Council, which, as said, has been dissolved owing to the fact that there are a number of platforms within each country from which to discuss matters of concern and of mutual interest. Of critical importance is that this bill, members, this bill strengthens cooperation between government and accountable institutions, especially banks and firms, in effectively mitigating against risk which contribute in weakening the country's financial position. The bill enhances supervisory powers. However, it is important to note that FIC will be done consistent with the Protection of Personal Information Act 2013. It's also important to understand that we have to give effect to the Constitutional Court decision in the matter of Estate Agencies Affairs Board versus Auction Alliance Ltd, which in essence made clear that the Section 45B of FIC Act is unconstitutional. Therefore, the bill, consistent with the court order, provides for a warrant requirement and to state in which circumstances a warrant would not be required. The bill, therefore, members, expands the definition, as other members have already said, of beneficial holder. It also clarifies who is the legal person. It also further unpacks in depth the domestic prominent influential person, executive officer, foreign prominent public official, etc. This is done in order to avoid ambiguities and to ensure that the bill is actually enforceable. Members, the National Treasury has had to consult widely, and even the committee also consulted widely on this particular bill, because it does have certain implications. As also already alluded by Umazambane, that there were certain aspects of the bill that we had to deal with. Umazambane phela wangasekhaya kwaZulu noma nje esawelela ngaphesheya wayeyiqabane, by the way, former president weNUSAS lo. But ke uyaganga nje.
Honourable Member, your time has now expired.
Chairperson, finally, Chairperson, the ANC supports this bill and would like it to be adopted. Comrades, let's
Thank you, Honourable Member.
And get it.
The next speaker is the Honourable Minister of Finance.
Chairperson, honourable members, and members of the public, this bill is about ensuring that South Africa is compliant with international requirements and standards, and that we are fully aligned to the regulatory framework for issues around money laundering, financing, terrorism, etc. Financial crime, honourable members, remains a global concern. The recent Panama Papers shed further light into how wealthy individuals dodge tax and launder money. I hope there's none of us on that list. Following the global financial crisis of 2008, the major economies of the world that came together as the G20 met in Toronto and pledged their support for the work of the Financial Action Task Force and encouraged FATF to monitor global compliance with anti-money laundering and combating of financing of terrorism. South Africa, of course, is a member of the G20 and remains bound by that commitment. The consequences, honourable members, of financial crime and related money laundering and similar of such criminal proceeds can have devastating effects on government revenues and their ability to deliver critical services to society. So there's a very direct relationship between illicit financial flows, tax evasion, stealing money from the state, and what people on the ground ultimately benefit or don't benefit as a result of these activities. The ability to easily launder money can compromise both financial and economic stability by introducing both operational and reputational risk for any financial institution, while also compromising the accuracy of macroeconomic statistics and the integrity of our economy. If left unchecked, financial crimes, like any other crime, and illicit financial flows will chip away at the core of our moral values and stability of our society. The consequence of South Africa not updating its laws, as we are doing in this bill, and aligning them with international best practice, will result in major negative implications for South Africa. This could include us being put on a FATF watch list, our financial institutions being sanctioned by supervisors locally and in foreign jurisdictions, and South Africa will struggle undertaking international trade as foreign correspondent banks will refuse facilitating foreign currency transactions on our behalf. All of these could have major implications, as you will understand, for South Africa's economy and therefore employment in our society. It is therefore the responsibility of all of us, both in the public and private sector, to be constantly vigilant in protecting ourselves from being the targets of potential money launderers. If financial institutions or any other relevant institution are seen as easy targets by criminals, both within and outside of our ranks, then they will be abused and misused. Money laundering is a crime, and any concealment of proceeds of financial crime encourages and amounts to collaboration with underlying crimes, whether bribery, poaching of endangered species, drug trafficking, tax evasion, and many other similar crimes. This bill, which was tabled in Parliament last year, seeks to make our regulatory framework on combating financial crime, especially money laundering and terror financing, stronger. The bill adopts best practice as recommended, as I said earlier, and many speakers have said, by the Financial Action Task Force, multilateral institutions like the IMF, and of course the United Nations itself. We as South Africa, by virtue of the ratification of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption by Parliament in 2004, also subscribed to the anti-corruption campaigns around the world. One of the key recommendations coming from FATF is the need to identify, as has been pointed out, politically exposed persons. Our cabinet took a bold step in 2015 in its commitment to fight financial crime by approving the current bill, which acknowledges that corruption and bribery have two sides, both in the public sector and in the private sector. And notwithstanding the lack of clarity around the prominent and important persons, I am sure that in the near future we will reach greater clarity in that area and provide the certainty that is actually required. More recently, the question of beneficial ownership has come to the fore. A week or so ago, there was a conference in London which discussed this issue. In other words, once one looks through all the complex structures that are set up, as Dr. Koza was pointing out, by lawyers, accountants, and financial advisors, who actually owns a particular entity and is the financial beneficiary of the business that that particular entity conducts. And for South Africa, that becomes an important new terrain in which we've got to also comply. But one of the messages we need to send as South Africa to the United Kingdom and similar countries is that they must stop providing protection to tax havens within their jurisdiction. They need to urgently close up those tax havens, those various islands that are called territories of the UK and other countries, so that we can actually do the work that we have to do with greater efficiency and effectiveness. There's a few other points that I want to emphasize that the Honorable Mania, for example, raises. I'm sure that in considering the bill, Honorable Mania, you've actually read the original bill, and you will understand that the director of the FIC, as is the Minister of Finance, is prohibited by the current legislation from indicating, and I don't even know myself, by the way, whether the FIC is investigating person X or person Y. So it's unfair for you to throw the accusation of obfuscation. Nobody's obfuscating. Let me give you the assurance that we will do, and entities that report to me, to the extent I can manage that, will do what is required by the law without fear or favor. And please understand what the constraints of the law are, and kindly help us not to mislead the public about what can be disclosed and can't be disclosed. Secondly, if this entity is to say person X or person Y, or entity A or entity B is being investigated, you're actually warning them to go and hide whatever they need to actually hide. And this, and finally, is what we've answered in the parliamentary question, which will be put on your table today. I want to thank the committee for the extensive consultations that they've undertaken, and I also want to share the concern that some of the honourable members have put on the table that we have few successful prosecutions in this area, whilst there's a lot of activity in this area that needs the attention of both the investigating agencies and the prosecuting agencies. Some of us might be old enough to remember Springbok Radio and a program called Mark Saxon, and the title of the program was No Place to Hide. And what we need to ensure that in matters like this, there is indeed no place to hide. So let me congratulate Honorable Karim and the members of the committee and the officials of the FIC and the National Treasury for doing an extremely good piece of work, and ask all of you to support this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. That concludes the speakers list. Are there any objections to the bill being read a second time? No objections agreed to. The Secretary will read the bill a second time.
Financial Intelligence Center Amendment Bill.
The bill will be sent to the National Council of Provinces for concurrence. The Secretary will read the fourth order.
Consideration of report of Standing Committee on Appropriations on Appropriation Bill.
I now recognize the Honorable the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
I move that the report be adopted by this House.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? No objections agreed to. Before I recognize the Secretary to read the next order, I want to recognize the school learners in the gallery today. Welcome to Parliament. They're from different schools in the Western Cape. And it's always a pleasure to have you observing our proceedings. The Secretary will read the fifth order.
First reading debate, Appropriation Bill.
The first speaker is the Honorable Kwabaza.
Honorable House Chairperson, Your Excellency, Honorable Deputy President of the Republic, Ministers and Deputy Ministers, and Honorable Members. I present this the Standing Committee, the report of the Standing Committee on Appropriations with respect to the 2016 Appropriations Bill. Since Parliament referred the bill to the Appropriations Committee on the 4th of May 2016, the committee then invited comments through public hearings and written submissions from the public, from interested stakeholders, and from the departments. Would like to report that the committee received written comments from 204 individuals, coordinated by the International Budgetary Partnership and Code 4 SA. We received comments from COSATU. We consulted with the stakeholders, the Financial and Fiscal Commission, the Human Sciences Research Council, the Public Service Commission, the Department of Higher Education, Department of Public Works, the Department of Human Settlement, and the Department of Small Business Development. It is against this backdrop, Honorable Chairperson, that the committee, having considered all the views and suggestions of the stakeholders, deliberated and adopted the report. I make this initial comment so that I could be able to indicate to this House that the report was adopted. However, the report having been adopted, the DA then reserved their right not to support the report. And of course, the EFF did not support the report, as was expected. I did say you reserve your right. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chairperson, the ANC government continues to pursue the goal of achieving inclusive economic growth, creation of decent work, and the eradication of inequalities as envisaged in the National Development Plan 2030. In pursuit of this strategic goal, the 2016 Appropriations Bill allocates 10.2 billion rand over the medium term to manufacturing development incentives, 3.4 billion rand to special economic zones and 3.4 billion rand to economic zones program. The infrastructure program in industrial parks received an additional funding of 260 million rand for 2016-17 financial year and 2017-18 financial year as well. Spending on water resources and bulk infrastructure is expected to increase to 36.4 billion rand over the medium term. My colleague, Honorable Shopes-Tole, will develop on this issue later on. In addition, the bill ensures a more effective land reform and rural development, more compact cities with decent and affordable transport, and the development of industries and services that use local content and support local suppliers. Honorable Speaker, for the first time, the 2016 Appropriations Bill allocates 810 million rand to early childhood education development over the medium term expenditure framework. It is estimated that 104,000 children will be subsidized through this allocation, and 4,000 ECD centers will benefit from the maintenance program. Basic education has received an annual budget increase of 7.4%. Post-school education and training receives 7.9% increase and 8.1% budget growth for the social protection over the MTF period. I wish to refer specifically to higher education, kakhulukazi ngoba kusemqoka ukuthi uhulumeni ka-ANC aqinisekise ukuthi imfundo ephakeme iyathuthuka ngaso sonke isikhathi. The higher education and training receives 16.3 billion rand, which has been added in the medium-term allocation for post-school education and training function group. Of this, 5.7 billion rand is directed towards the funding shortfall at universities caused by the fees, by keeping the fees for 2016 academic year at 2015 levels, and the carry-through costs over the MTF period. An amount of 2.5 billion rand in 2016-17 is transferred to the National Student Financial Aid to clear the debt of 71,753 students for 2013 to 2015 academic year. And along this, a further 8 billion rand over the medium term to support underfunded current students to complete their studies. Sithanda ukukubalula ke lokhu ngoba kuke kwabama entanyeni abafundi ukuthi bangakwazi ukuqhubeka nezifundo zabo ngoba kukhona izimali abazikweletayo, abanye bangakwazi ukuqeda kahle izifundo zabo. Uhulumeni we-ANC ke uyaqinisekisa ukuthi labo bafundi kade benezikweleti sezizokhokhelwa manje lezo zikweleti bakwazi ukuqedela ukufunda bathole nezitifiketi zabo baphume bayobheka impilo in the future. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, the Appropriations Bill is projected to allocate 810 billion rand to the 2016-17 social wage, which covers health, education, social protection, housing subsidies for the poor South Africans. This constitutes 60% of spending, and this budget growth grows by 1% faster than inflation over the next 3 years. We wish to highlight the achievements of the ANC since 2004 and indicate that this budget, this bill, projects forward to further bettering of the lives of our people in 2016. For instance, approximately 12 million households have access to electricity, 7 million more than in 1994. Approximately 93% of South Africans had potable water in 2015, compared to 64% in 1994. Land and economic transformation, nearly 80,000 land claims, totaling 3.4 million hectares, have been settled, and 1.8 million people have benefited. 500 informal settlements, have been replaced with quality housing and basic services, which has benefited 3 million provided 3 million free houses and have benefited 16 million South Africans. These are just but a few examples of the successes of the ANC government. And the 2016 Appropriations Bill seeks to further develop these achievements of the ANC government. Honorable Chairperson, notwithstanding the subdued economic growth and unfavorable fiscal environment, the 2016 Appropriation Bill seeks to achieve a consolidated primary surplus where reserves will exceed non-interest spending. The bill confirms the ANC government's commitment to reduce the budget deficit from 3.2% in 2016-17, 2.8% in 2017-18, and 2.4% in 2018-19 financial years. Honorable Chairperson, the ANC government has prioritized about 1 billion rand in 2016-17 for drought relief interventions and 2.8 billion rand for Fetsatlala food security. It is expected that this food security initiative will bring 120,000 hectares of land to productive use, benefiting 145 subsistence and smallholder food producers in each of the next 3 years. Of significance as well is the allocation of 2 billion rand for agri-parks in 44 rural districts and 4.6 billion rand for the acquisition of over 1 million hectares of land to develop 1,107 farms. All in all these social and economic infrastructure projects and agricultural programs pursue the goal of achieving a better life for all South Africans. Honorable Chairperson, I table the 2010 Appropriations Bill without amendments, and I request this House to adopt the bill. The ANC support the 2016 Appropriations Bill. Thank you.
Siyabonga lunga elihloniphekile, ngizocela ilunga elihloniphekile umnumzane uMenir.
Chairperson, We have powers to amend the Appropriations Bill in terms of the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act. And so for the first time in 22 years, we attempted to use those powers. We proposed a 9.52 billion rand adjustment to the 2016-17 budget by proposing 399 amendments to the Appropriations Bill in order to fund 6 proposals aimed at improving the lives of people in South Africa. Specifically, we proposed to create jobs by allocating an additional 1.2 billion rand to fund approximately 180,000 new opportunities in the expanded public works program. We proposed to fight crime by allocating an additional 500 million rand to establish a specialized unit to fight gang and drug-related crime. We proposed to assist struggling students by allocating an additional 2.73 billion rand to provide more funding for struggling students who qualify for assistance under the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. We proposed to fight corruption by allocating an additional 117.89 million rand to fully fund the Office of the Public Protector. We proposed to assist poor households who are battling with high food prices by allocating an additional 2.24 billion rand to assist social grant beneficiaries. And we proposed to provide drought relief by allocating an additional 2.73 billion rand to assist drought-stricken communities. We ensured our budget proposals were budget neutral. In other words, they could have been funded by reprioritizing expenditure within the existing budget and would have had no effect on the fiscal deficit. So to reprioritize, we firewalled 13 national departments responsible for delivering frontline services from any spending cuts in 2016-17. And then specifically, we proposed to save 584.1 million rand by simulating a hiring freeze and cutting spending on any new employees in 27 national departments that had not been firewalled from spending cuts. We proposed to save 1.38 billion rand by cutting the increase in spending across 10 economic classification items in the 27 national departments not identified for spending cuts. And these economic classifications including advertising, consultants, fleet services, travel and subsistence, and entertainment. We proposed to save a further 422.21 million rand by making discretionary spending cuts on any increase in spending between 2015-16 and 2016-17 in the Department of Public Works, the Prestige Program, in the Department of Police, the VIP Security Program, and in the National Treasury, the Secret Service Program. We proposed further to save 7.18 billion rand by making discretionary spending cuts in the National Treasury, the BRICS Bank, and in the Department of Defense, the VIP presidential jet. This is how we proposed to reprioritize 9.52 billion rand in the 2016-17 budget to create jobs, to fight crime, to assist students, to fight corruption, to help the poor, and to provide drought relief. But in the end, these proposals were rejected in Parliament. So let the people know. The DA voted to create jobs, but the ANC voted against creating jobs. The DA voted for a specialized unit to fight gang and drug-related crime, and the ANC voted against a specialized unit to fight drug and gang-related crime. The DA voted to increase student grants, but the ANC voted against increasing student grants. The DA voted to fully fund the Office of the Public Protector, but the ANC voted against fully funding the Office of the Public Protector. The DA voted to increase social grants, but the ANC voted against increasing social grants. And the DA voted to increase drought relief, but the ANC voted against increasing drought relief. This was a first step in making the Money Bills Act work in Parliament. There's much work to be done, but in the end,
Order,
budget
honourable
politics
member,
is here,
your time
and
is
budget
up.
politics is here to stay in Parliament.
Thank you, Honourable Sitim Simang.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Government spending in today's constructive domestic and international economic arenas and characterized by slow growth and uncertainty requires the utmost diligence and care. Government expenditure has now exceeded the 1 trillion rand mark. The bulk of the expenditure goes towards the social welfare and grants, where almost 17 million people are receiving such welfare and grants, and there is talk of such welfare being made available to people of younger ages, thus widening the welfare net. This begs the question, what kind of state is being set up by this government? Is it a welfare state? Why are we not empowering people to use their hands and minds to become self-sufficient income earners? If we don't begin with this approach in earnest, we'll surely run out of money one day. And it won't be too long before we reach the 2 trillion rand mark in government expenditure. We must create a state where people are provided with opportunities, and this is where appropriation of funds becomes relevant. Too much money is being spent on hands out as opposed to hands up. And as long as this continues to happen with free housing and free services, then this is just going to create a greater dependency on the state. This might suit the governing party, as reliance on state-sponsored welfare has the effect of creating loyal voters. And it is common cause that during election campaigns, the ruling party has gone around and said that a failure to vote for them could result in a withdrawal and loss of welfare. Broadly speaking, the question is, can we afford the kind of debt that we are incurring? Budget deficits are slowly creeping. And whilst the Moody's rating was relatively neutral, the other ratings agencies might not be so accommodating. It is best that we begin active being in our public spending and tightening up. Otherwise, we will descend into a spiral of debt from which we will not easily recover. The taxpayer of this country deserves
Order, Honourable
better.
Member, your time is up.
Government must be reined in. The IFP supports the bill. Thank you.
Honourable A.M. Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, Ministers, Deputy Ministers, members of this Honourable House. Let me at the very outset say that the National Freedom Party supports this budget. Honourable Chairperson, in terms of social development, Vote 17 continues to receive the biggest share with 148.9 billion, which is 20.6% of the total appropriation. This biggest share of this budget is for social grants, which will continue to help families in the face of skyrocketing cost of living. Sadly, 22.3 billion allocated to education, basic education, which is Vote 14, comes in the backdrop of the torching of schools in the Vuyani in the Limpopo province. In her budget vote speech, the minister estimated the cost of reconstructing the schools to be above 720 million rand. Clearly, this will go down as one of the most appalling tragedies which must definitely be condemned with the harshest contempt possible. We hope that there will not be an introduction of another SCD program which will take years to construct schools while children are subjected to unthinkable learning conditions. In terms of Vote 16, which is the health, which receives 38.6 billion, the Honorable Minister Motsoaledi indicated 1 billion rand will be used to fund the program of removing the CD4 count as an eligibility criteria for ARV treatment as of September this year. This is commendable, Minister, and money well spent. The good work done by the department compels all of us to support this budget. One can only hope that provincial health department will take a lead from the national department, particularly in terms of primary health care. We hope that finally there will be improvements in the performance of all components of the National Health Insurance Grant. While this Honourable House appears to be the ideal venue for grandstanding, let me take this opportunity, Honourable Minister, to do exactly that. The Zululand district municipality under the National Freedom Party was found to have the highest quality of district clinics in the country, with the Western Cape or the Cape Metro providing the worst quality of district clinics. We hope that 15.2 billion allocated to water and sanitation will help soften the crisis in the country. The other challenge and concern we have, Honourable Chairperson, is the issue of the learner transport scheme must be addressed. The budget of 56 billion allocated to the Department of Transport will not be a silver bullet unless government sorts out the chaos. 30 days, a challenge that remains is that of a failure to pay suppliers and service providers within 30 days as set out in Section 38 of the PFMA. Efforts to root out corruption, the sterling work done by the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer, Mr. Kenneth Brown, in rooting out corruption in the procurement processes is welcomed. Honourable Chairperson, the National Freedom has made recommendations which are included in the final report of the Standing Committee on Appropriations. Finally, we commend Honourable Praveen Gordhan for his selfless efforts to help steer the country in the right fiscal path in the midst of the most turbulent times in the history of our democracy. Each and every one of us must play our role. The National Freedom Party supports this budget.
Honorable Nkwankwa.
I must be honest, House Chair, from where I was sitting, I think our ANC comrades, they only clapped when they heard the word commend. We must commend. They didn't know what he was commending. Some of them even thought that he was condemning them, so they had to think for a few seconds before they started clapping. Comrades, let me give you an example. Mr. Minister, if we talk about improving the quality of our spend in government in general, which is what this bill deals, apart from allocations, but the quality of the spend is a serious problem. I think you've highlighted that in the past. But key here is that, for instance, when a matter was brought to my attention here about Parliament, a trip that was undertaken by the Secretary of Parliament. Before you say, listen, I wrote to the Speaker on the 14th of April, brought the matter to our attention, and I decided not to do what most political parties would do. Under normal circumstances, you'd send an open letter. You know, it would reach the media before it gets to you, right? I didn't do that. For 8-9 days, we were quiet, and nothing happened besides an acknowledgement of receipt. But guess what happened? The response to that correspondence, which highlights a clear abuse of state resources, was only written on the 5th of May. But it was only sent to me 10 minutes before the budget vote on Parliament, while the bell was ringing, right? Guess what? So I decided, okay, the Speaker maybe was going to address the matter here. I kept quiet. I decided not to raise it. You know, I had people talking about the matter. I decided, you know what, let me not claim the victory and say I wrote the letter. That's neither here nor there. The point is about making sure that we use resources properly. But guess what happened? The letter says, we will investigate the matter. That's the final sentence of the letter. We'll investigate the matter. But when the Speaker concluded her debate here, she absolved the Secretary of any wrongdoing. What would you say in a letter? You are going to investigate the matter, and then in the debate here say, there was nothing wrong. Everything was above board insofar as that trip is concerned. What are you trying to say? That's the problem. Now, if we can't be serious about such issues, we cannot inculcate a culture where people use state resources properly. It's also a problem when you look at, for instance, if you look at all the reports, whether you go to this department or another department, you find that departments actually, they would not achieve their targets, but they would use most of their budgets, if not all. It's a serious problem. We've said, for instance, in the Standing Committee on Finance, we've highlighted it as an issue. We said sometimes maybe there's a problem with the target setting exercise. I remember in the Committee on Public Enterprises, where we're talking about the shareholder management bill and the compact and so on. We said, the problem here at times is that we're expected to oversight a situation where we did not have an input or an understanding into the rationale behind the target setting process. So you don't know what went into that exercise, whether enough stretch and pull was built into the target setting exercise before you can say you've done a good
Order,
job or not.
Honorable Nkwankwa, your time is up.
Yo, liyakhawuleza eli xesha
Ewe.
thina.
Oh. Honorable Swart.
Thank you, Chairperson. We consider this all-important appropriation bill which sets out spending plans contained in the budget against a sluggish economic growth, weakening currency, a devastating drought, and a looming sovereign ratings downgrade. Now, Chairperson, the Minister's budget was generally well received, and he made it clear that there was a strict consolidation path would be followed. The expenditure ceiling was lowered, and we saw that with many departments complaining. And the Minister also made it clear that the SOEs would be reformed and new rules would be brought in to prevent what he termed predatory attempts to capture state institutions for the purposes of self-enrichment. And we've seen that to a certain degree in this appropriation bill. The Minister has also commendably done everything in his power to protect National Treasury and to prevent a sovereign downgrade. And that particularly given startling revelations that we've seen about state capture. And those efforts have borne fruit, which the ACDP welcomes. We see Moody's ratings confirm the country's ratings, albeit with a negative outlook. And in its view, the country was approaching a turning point after several years of slowing growth. A muted recovery was also envisaged by the IMF from next year. Now, the ACDP, and I'm sure members are encouraged by these views, yet we are clearly very far from being out of the woods. Fitch and S&P global ratings appear to be more pessimistic, and there is a significant risk of a downgrade with very serious consequences on investments and public finances. And is it not then incumbent upon all of us to work together to avoid this? Honourable Minister, our narrative, you've referred to this before, and whilst political point scoring is the very nature of politics, particularly in the run-up to an election, surely we also need to regard the common good and the impact that a downgrade will have. And while economic growth is partially dependent on the recovery of global demand, and we've got many global headwinds, we also need to ensure that the domestic issues over which we do have control do not aggravate the situation. We cannot have policy uncertainty. We cannot have, such as we saw with the new mining charter launched, without due consultation and while litigation was ongoing. The Finance Minister has done everything he can to restore investor confidence and ward off a junk credit rating. Yet there is this ongoing battle with those who seek to control state finances for their own nefarious aims. It began in December. We see it is ongoing. However, as a word of encouragement, there is, as William Shakespeare said, a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at its flood leads on to victory. To conclude, as a nation, we have this brief moment to recognize where we have failed, to turn from our wicked ways, to recommit ourselves to changes that will make a lasting difference.
Honourable Member,
I thank you.
Your time is up. Thank you. Honourable Sinongwanyane.
Thank you very much, Honourable House Chair, Honourable Deputy Presidents, Honourable Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Honourable Members, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen. Honourable House Chair, today we are debating the Appropriations Bill and the allocation of budgets to the different departments. And this we do amid all sorts of doubting Thomases and messengers of doom. The ANC government is on track with the realities within the country and therefore has applied conscious efforts to ensure equitable distribution of resources on the basis of real needs and challenges rather than sentiments. This appropriation of budgets is not just a game or an exercise, as some would want us to believe. Not surprising though, as we have people, including in this House, who simply thrive on criticizing anything that the ANC does. People are so obsessed with the ANC, blaming it just for about everything, to the extent that they even say things that they themselves do not even believe in. Fellow ANC members, you must not be surprised if one of these days they accuse you of causing the drought that we've just had recently. Listening to some of them, you think that South Africa only started to exist in 1994. There is never any mention of the apartheid era and the evils, and its evils whatsoever. But they forget that black people are not that stupid. Gone are the days when brainwashing was the order of the day. And we are wide awake, so, oh, thank you. And we are wide awake so we can see through all the dirty tricks. Ask me anything about apartheid and I'll give you first-hand experience of what it entailed, because I lived it in every manner. So it just irks me when someone comes with some fabricated stories. There was a time when some of us were not considered as human beings, and I mean literally. I can still remember how I was ill-treated in my own country and my family being dispossessed by virtue of the skin of their color. In 1994, the ANC government had to start by undoing the mess created by the apartheid government, including payment of debts for things which they never even benefited from. But you listen to these big mouths and see selective loss of memory, people pretending not to remember all this. The ANC government has made unbelievable progress during the last 22 years in improving the lives of all citizens, including many white people. It's also true that a lot still needs to be done to improve the socio-economic status of the majority of South Africans. But let us forget that this mess we are in was man-made as part of the exclusion policies of the apartheid government. But guess what? Some architects of apartheid have suddenly become advocates of the people, questioning the decisions of government, and have actually adopted criticism of the ANC as their agenda for day-to-day survival. We've come a long way, and each year we get direction through the State of the Nation Address, the states of the provinces, and we have the National Development Plan, which is very clear as to where we're going. The socio-economic status of black people has changed for the better and continues to do so, no matter what others wish to make it look. It takes just a positive mind to accept that the wheels of change are moving forward and there's no going back. And distorting facts will never make any difference. I've just listened to somebody from the DA trying to tell people that they are trying to do this and the ANC is opposing it. We are not governing this country. You must just always remember that. Look at the social services being delivered at different spheres of government, and I'm very proud of this ANC government, which has helped me to become a human being. You may not believe some of the things that some of us have been through. I grew up fetching water from a spring, walking long distances to school. Some of my schoolmates had to walk barefooted, and being confined to some remote areas from where my white masters lived. I was actually a victim of the Group Areas Act, where my parents were removed from their place of residence at Ladysmith, and the area was declared a white area, so they were relocated to what these people called reserves. Whatever that meant, I don't even know. I only had electricity for the first time when I was an adult, having only touched an electric switch at boarding school, and that was it. Today, we have decent housing, electricity, running water, sanitation, health services, and access to education. The list is endless. Honorable House Chair, the 2016-27 budget allocation is clearly pro-poor, a very necessary step to improve the livelihoods of those living under various forms of social ills. Access to education is one of the most important vehicles for social transformation, as it empowers learners and students to be able to have a productive future. Remember that many of us never had the opportunity to get an education as black people because they would so then we would have, then we would have deprived the white masters of cheap and sometimes free labor. Only a limited number of blacks were able to go to school, and most did not reach high school. And this was compounded by the then system which was called Bantu education, which was inferior and was created specifically for blacks. When democracy set in, blacks were already at a position of disadvantage, and getting out of it has been one big struggle. In spite of all the progress made, we have the serious challenge of racism, which continuously raises its ugly head, often in a very subtle manner, but fortunately we can recognize it from a distance. We have people who want to own public schools today, and they deny black children access to them in the name of school governing bodies. Do they even understand why the ANC government came up with this concept in the first place? It was definitely not aimed at perpetuating an evil system. The introduction of early childhood development program is but one of those that will help children from poor communities get prepared for school, as most of them are unable to access facilities such as crèches due to financial constraints. The budget allocation for this program is a clear message that it is a priority and has huge benefits. Honorable House Chair, health services in this country have had to deal with immeasurable transformation challenges since the advent of democracy. Pre-1994, health services for black people were a joke of tokenism, when they deliberately segregated to ensure they could not access quality services. They dared not go to whites-only institutions, which were the reserve of a few. Shame on them. Now you listen to the architects of apartheid playing the blame game and barking at the wrong tree. The ANC government introduced free health services at primary health care level for obvious reasons. Otherwise, I cannot begin to imagine what would be happening to the masses of our people. The fat cats couldn't be bothered by our waiting there to find fault. Social grants have been allocated a fair share, even though one cannot necessarily say it will solve all problems, looking at the size of the real need. May I remind you what used to happen with the old age pensions before 1994. Black people received less than 50% of what other racial groups got, and they only received these grants every 2 months, while the rest enjoyed bigger amounts and monthly. So here, who's fooling who? I've just heard somebody talking about them now promoting funding for social grants, but it doesn't refer to what they did in the past. During apartheid, black people lived in government-owned little matchbox houses for which they had to pay rent to the then municipalities, but never had the opportunity to own these houses, and they had almost no access to social services. They had been removed from areas where they enjoyed a certain level of free movement, and an area that comes to mind is Sophia Town in Johannesburg. In the process, the allocation of areas was along tribal lines, where there were areas like Sotho section, Zulu section, and so on. Another manifestation of the divide and rule apartheid policy, a threat to unity among black people. This is a challenge the current government continues to grapple with, mainly the allocation of title deeds. The real sinners are sitting tight and pretending to be innocent. What compounded this situation was the deliberate location of these settlements as far away from the cities as possible, meaning that black people had to travel long distances to work, a situation that continues even now. This is obviously costly for the poor, while the rich work closer to their places of residence. Government has introduced a mixed housing project such as Cosmo City in Johannesburg, which is aimed at locating some people closer to their workplaces, but this really annoys racists who claim that these settlements will lower the value of their properties.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Your time has expired.
Okay.
Thank you. The next speaker is Honorable Dr. FIC.
A national budget is a central political process. In addition to laying out the expenditure and income of the government, it provides a platform for a long-term vision of our country and its political credibility for the future. It is about achieving resilience and ensuring South Africa's fiscal consolidation so that we are not caught up in with high and increasing debt. The budget is about mobilizing the people's creative energies to collectively move the nation forward. It is essentially about building trust in the economy. Chair, this ANC government continues with its egotistic, know-it-all, dictatorial, vindictive attitudes and has presented a budget which is going to make our future even bleaker. It is a budget which is going to increase the gap between the rich and the poor. Above all, it is a budget that is unrealistic and unsustainable in the medium term based on likely decreasing revenues. Our hope was that this budget was going to give the country a better South Africa for tomorrow. There are important quantitative elements in this budget, but they are not everything. Issues such as vision, leadership, governance, genuine democracy, and the quality of life of people on a sustained basis are equally important. A budget is an opportunity to sow the seeds of inclusivity by reaching out to all the people with sustainable economic and social policies. Unfortunately, this budget falls far short of the goals, with education, health, human settlements, and social protection making up only 56.7% of this budget. We need to ask, who is this budget really for? In the last 7 years, we have seen a rapid breakdown of state institutions, preventing them from working to the benefit of the people. The Department of Health has many problems: a lack of doctors, nurses, equipment and medication, and a lack of timely services. The Department of Higher Education has inadequate funding for National Student Fund Aid Scheme. And the Department of Basic Education lacks commitment from teachers and delivers books too late. The heart of our country's problems is the lack of good leadership and appalling standards of governance at virtually all levels, which has been exacerbated under President Zuma. A lack of accountability and transparency has become a norm. Good governance is not merely a cliche and a catchphrase. Its principles are critically important for the progress and prosperity of our beloved nation. Chairperson, South Africa is ranked way down in 61st place on Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. South Africa also had below average integrity ratings as measured by the annual Corruption Perceptions Index. Our economic growth. This government has treated this term as business as usual, without a single major government initiative to create new industries with good incomes. It has continued to claim acceptable growth. They misuse the term, claiming the economy will recover in the near future and making it sound as though somebody will wave a magic wand and this will just happen. Nothing could be farther from the truth. But more importantly, Honorable Speaker, has it created many jobs? The answer is no. The only historic thing about these past 7 years has been the increasing weight of debt our people have been placed under. Never in the history of this country have we been in so much debt. But Honorable Speaker, the massive spending last year of more than 2 billion rand on the allocation, and the allocation of more than 3.7 billion rand for this year on the new development bank, funded through borrowing and asset sales of more than 23 billion rand last year, could leave the biggest dent yet in our budget, and it is our people who will be shackled by the burden of debt. This is unacceptable. The targets of the NDP are not being achieved and will not be achieved under this ANC government. Government debt will increase by 9.87% for the 2016-17 financial year, and our budget deficit increases to 4.2% of GDP. Debt as a percentage of GDP will reach 46.2%. It was only 24% in 2009. The long and short of this is that the people of this country are and will continue to be paying for debt.
Honorable members, the noise levels are too high. Continue.
Based on 2016 figures, a child born today automatically inherits a debt of 32,800 upon birth, before they've even opened their eyes, grown their first tooth, and taken their first steps. Each household will have a debt burden of more than 131,200. Each family will therefore forego the opportunity to buy a 131,200 car or invest 131,200 in a house. cheers, because they presently, against their will, owe and will be indirectly paying off 131,200 rand towards the servicing of these loans. They are already paying for it from increased prices and poor service delivery, because large amounts of funds are going towards paying our debt and interest payments. We have a greater need for sound financial management now more than ever. We should set clear targets on debt and borrowings. How should we spend public funds? Obviously not by spending millions on Nkandla, where the best use of public funds could be used, in this case, to build 2,200 homes for our people living in townships. The cost of living, food prices have increased by between 7% and 14% in the past 6 months, and electricity has increased by 9.4%. This has left most households worse off in very real terms. The sharp rise in food prices has disproportionately impacted on the poor, as poor households spend a large portion of their household budget on food. Unfortunately, the increased cost of living has not been accompanied by an increase in incomes. Unemployment rates have increased, and the country's continued low economic growth has hampered efforts to address poverty. The only way to improve the living standards of the poor is to have high inclusive economic growth that translates into more employment and increasing family incomes. The Honourable Minister of Finance remarked during his budget address that we need to work as a team to achieve the future that our people deserve. He can count on the Democratic Alliance to do exactly that, and to ensure that any legislation and policies that passes through this House will be robustly debated so that the good interests of the people are represented. It is what we have been called to do. Honourable Speaker, the difference between the Honourable Minister's view and our view is that the only team that can achieve this future for our people is Team DA. There are very serious shortcomings in this bill, underpinning this bill, and accordingly, the DA is unable to support it. I thank you.
Thank you. We now invite Honorable Shophe Sithole to take the debate forward.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, Honorable members of this House, Abshay, Minjani, Eko, nikhansa ngopfu Honorable Speaker, loko ni pfumelerile ku vulavula la ni vulavula na vanhu va le kaya leswaku ni va hlamusela kahle ku humelela yini la parliament. ANC ya vona leyi va nga yi kheta yi busy ya tirha, yi tirha hi ku chivirika, nakona yi tirha yi karhi yi ri na ku pfumela leswaku swi ta endleka. Tanihi loko President Mandela a hi byerile ku ri it all seems impossible until it is done. Aka tiko leri vanhu a va ku freedom a yi nga pfuki yi ve kona. Hina valava hi fikile hikwala hi ti-members ta parliament. It has happened. Hinkwaswo leswi nga la ka budget, leswi swi nga vulavuriwa hi minister na chairperson, swi ta endleka hi ndlela yaleyo. Before ni ya mahlweni na speech xa mina, ni la ku teka this opportunity ku va ni congratulate the President, Honorable His Excellency Honorable Jacob Zuma, ku va a hlawuriwile to co-chair the Health High Commission by the Secretary of the United Nations. Ni kombela mi n'wi bela mavoko. Swilo leswi swi komba kahle ku ri hambiloko vanhu vo tshama va karhi va vulavula va sapatela va sandza va endla mihlolo hinkwayo, the world believes in the ANC. The world believes that we can run this country and we are pushing forward. Nilako mi hlamusela nyana hi mhaka yin'wana leyi yi nga vulavuriwa hi the Honorable Deputy President, Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa. Loko a hlamusela timhaka ta infrastructure, a ri eRwanda, endhawu leyi va nge i Kigali. He said the coordination effect has benefited South Africa immensely and can be replicated. A hlamusela timhaka ta ku hlanganisa timhaka ta mali, timhaka ta miehleketo, timhaka ta technology, ya ku aka technology. And he is saying this because he comes from the ANC. He believes in inclusive growth. And this is the message that he took to Africa. He also pointed out that this strategy actually assisted us as the ANC within 21 years to build 4.3 houses. 4.3 million houses. We were also able to electrify more than 20 million houses because of the ANC strategy of inclusivity and of inclusivity. We are including ourselves, yourselves, the private sector, everybody in the development of the Republic of South Africa. Kambe ni fanele ku va ni dilaninyana na timhaka leti nga vulavuriwa la ti nga vekiwa hi xidyondzeki Professor 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 man wa Inkatha Freedom Party Msima. You know, honorable members, education is good if it assists you to understand society, to understand what is happening amongst the people. As the ANC, we're not theorizing anything. You know, the effect that this grants has had in our people is very immense. I remember between 1988 and 1990, in Bushbuckridge, we used to measure, we used to go to the maternity and count the number of children that died at birth and before the age of 5. We are still doing it in Bushbuckridge. And guess what? The numbers that used to die have disappeared. Children are living because the mothers are fed, because the children are fed. It's a question of life and death. It's not a joke. We should actually, you know, be realistic. Hypocrisy will not help us. Because as a black person, I know, Professor Msimang, even if you as a professor can afford to feed your children, you do have a distant relative who struggles to put a loaf of bread on the table. You do have those people. And you can't come here and actually say these things will make us a welfare state. We are a developmental state. We are not a welfare state. There are people, there are South Africans today who must survive hunger, who must be fed. It's a reality. There are families who will not otherwise see the end of day without those grants. So there is no question of a welfare state. Government is doing everything to make sure that South Africans do realize their first right, the right to life. That is a right in the Constitution. And anybody who actually respects the Constitution should actually observe and encourage that right. I was actually very happy when I saw Honorable Manir on the stage. I thought, I remember what happened in the committee yesterday. In the Appropriation Committee, we were presented with a thick document from the DA. They said they are making amendments to the Appropriation Bill. I even called it a doctorate thesis. And I said, how much are you going to pay me to actually assist you with your thesis? Because we don't work like that. In that committee, we demand and we are adamant to the fact that departments must give us documents at least before 3 days. We can't have people actually going and draft some secret documents, fake Bibles like this, dump it in front of us and say we must decide on them. When we queried that, Honorable Dr. FIC raised his hand and he said, no, Honorable Chair, I did it because it is a norm of this committee. He said that, and he knows very well that we've always reprimanded departments, and he also spoke on those debates. So I want to tell you that I will not even bother to worry about what he has said, because I cannot rely on a person who can, with a straight face, actually say things that he knows are not correct. He knows very well that what he was saying was wrong. He knows the stance of the committee, but he decided to come and say the opposite. And I think, honorable members, when we deal with the budget, we are dealing with the lives and survival of our own people. We mustn't come and play jokes. What I want to say is that that Bible that the DA brought to our committee is nothing else but a document intended to delay the passing of the budget. And I want people at home to know that if the budget is not passed, government will not deliver services. Grants will not be paid. Grants will not be paid. And if grants are not paid, it means if grants are not paid, we will not be able to survive as a nation, because many people will lack food. I don't worry, I'm not talking about these people on my left. I will tell you why. Mr. Honorable Manir yesterday actually made me understand why they do this. He asked the president a shocking question. He said, don't you consider abandoning your policies and adapting to structural adjustment by the IMF? I was shocked, actually, because those things have never worked in any. Many developing economies actually suffered. Many countries went bankrupt because of, and the crafters of those policies did not have the courtesy to actually apologize. Actually, they came out with more excuses that those countries did not implement the policies correctly, and then they did not implement them faithfully. All sorts of excuses. Fact of the matter is that structural adjustments did not do well for developing economies. So as the African National Congress, we believe in a mixed economy. There is no way we are going to just look at one strategy and say, this is the one that we are going to follow, like the DA. They are married to that. They are married to $1, one vote. That is their problem. They don't believe in actually taking everybody on the democracy in this country. They were actually dragged, screaming and kicking to the one man, one vote. That is the problem. So, as the ANC, we are going to implement our policies without worrying about the structural adjustment. Forget them. They won't work in this country. I actually want to highlight one thing. Me, when all of you speak, I keep quiet, I listen. I don't shout at any one of you. But you don't believe in the Constitution. You try to frustrate my freedom of expression, which my parents, myself, and everybody have fought for. You are not going to win. I'm going to assert my right to speak in this house, and people believe me. Let me tell you one thing. That is what we are going to do. Yeah, I must bore you. Why must I please you? IMF, why must I play, what? Structural adjustments, I don't want to please you. I will bore you, it's my time. And I just want to tell you that this government is going to put a lot of attention in investigating drugs.
Thank you very much.
Like the drugs that were found in the church of your leader.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Thank you. We now invite the Honorable Minister to close the debate.
Chairperson, honorable members, the chairperson of the committee, Mr. Gobaza, thank you very much for an excellent piece of work. The Appropriations Committee is one that is not sufficiently recognized as one of those that has a very complex task to look at the entire budget and receive representations and then present to Parliament its recommendations on what Parliament should do in respect of the various allocations that government has decided upon. Let me repeat the key messages of the budget and recall for you that the budget is about people's lives, it's about their future, it's about saying what we consider to be our priorities, and it's about how we establish stability within our country whilst we look at a variety of challenges that we actually have to deal with. We said that South Africa is a resilient country and a resilient people, and that we will be able to respond to the challenges that the globe provides for us in terms of the tough economic environment and the dismal economic outlook, both amongst the advanced economies and the negativity towards the emerging markets. We've learned with the Deputy President at the World Economic Forum on Africa that in Africa we also have countries that are oil dependent and resource dependent who are going through tough times. But at the same time, there are a group of countries that are doing extremely well. Our focus, we said, is to reignite inclusive growth. Growth that will bring more people into the economy, ensure that the marginalized don't remain marginalized, but importantly, that all of South Africa benefits from any form of economic growth that we have. We said that we will do whatever we can in terms of our fiscal strategy to create a sustainable path forward. And so we delivered, contrary to what some of the honorable members have been saying, a balanced budget which enables us to reduce our deficit to 2.4% in the outer year, which enables us to look for 15 billion rands in 2 of the outer years as well, to get to the point that we want to get. We can for the first time say that we will have a primary surplus, that is, revenue will be above expenditure for that particular year, and an important marker of how we are running our economy and our fiscus. We kept our promise that we will consolidate our fiscus even further, and above all, we said that we will make sure that our debt is sustainable, unlike what Honorable FIC, he's here, was saying earlier on, and he doesn't really have an alternative either. And in doing so, in approaching the expenditure question, which is what we are looking at here, we have used various techniques in the post-recession period. We said we will combat wasteful expenditure, and we've got another list of wasteful expenditure that we want to cut during the current and succeeding years. We said we will reduce the compensation budget, and we have a plan that we've put forward in that regard. Close down underperforming programs. This is work we're doing with the Monitoring, Planning and Evaluation Department. In the past, we've used what we call a general haircut. We will stop new programs or slow some of them down, and we're beginning to do that. Reschedule or postpone certain capital projects which already have enough money, but in the outer years will have to battle for money. But there are two things we said we will not do. The one is cancel key capital projects, and the second we said we will not do is impact negatively on core social services and provision of income for poor people, as in social grants. And that's a promise that we've kept to our people. When Honorable Mania talks about exercising the power to amend the money bill, we congratulate him on that. But in terms of what the committee seems to be reporting, he should have taken the committee into confidence much earlier to give himself the opportunity to persuade the committee and eventually all of us that he has a better set of ideas about how allocations should actually work. So now he comes along and says he wants more money for EPWP. There is enough money there. And when we have a better fiscal situation, we'll put more money there. But there are many other places where there are money. For example, the Community Works Program, the Jobs Fund. So there are many areas in which government has demonstrated its commitment to creating jobs. But what he does not tell the South African public is that most of the jobs in South Africa are created by the private sector. And nowhere in the presentation does it say, where are we going to get the jobs in the private sector? And again, it is us as government and as the ANC that has been ensuring that the ratings agencies give us more time to get our plan to ignite growth going. It is we as the government and as the ANC that have been engaging business and trade unions, that have been putting together a package that we can credibly put to the ratings agencies, but also to our own people, to say, not only do we have a plan, but we have a plan of action to change the character of our economy. On the question of the students and the additional requirements, we've met their current requirements. But what he should also know and say to the South African public is that in the longer term, we need to find a better solution. And so a commission has been set up. There's discussions with the private sector on how they could participate in solving the problem of fees for students at tertiary educations that cannot afford them. And let's await the work of this particular commission. Another example that he gives is drought relief. But we said in the budget that in the contingency amount that we've set aside, we have both money in that contingency amount and in the budget of the Agriculture Department and in the disaster management environment to actually take care of any eventuality that farmers in South Africa, both small and big, will be confronted with as a result of the drought. He talks of the hiring freeze, but this is like stealing intellectual property. We've said that we are working towards a hiring freeze for certain categories of people and reducing the compensation budget. So the one appeal I want to make to Honorable Mania and to Honorable FIC is please help us to differentiate between grandstanding and electioneering and providing intelligent, workable, structural solutions. Don't mislead the public that you actually have an answer when you actually haven't run a country in your life. This side has run it for 20 years. The Honorable Msimang, as the previous speaker said, Honorable Shopa Sitole, we're not a welfare state. What we want is most of our people to earn their income by working, by applying their skills, by being better trained, and having the dignity of work and income. And that's the goal in the medium term that all of us want to actually achieve. Sheikh Imam is right that the destruction that we see, as the Minister of Basic Education has indicated, in the schools in Vuane is something that is both regrettable and must be outright condemned. It cannot be, as Minister Mashlobo is quoted as saying, that those who are having financial interest because of the old arrangement of municipalities now inspire a rampage where these almost 24 schools are wiped out in a very short period of time. And all of us must ask some tough questions about who is going to pay for these schools and where is that money actually going to come from. Honorable Kwankwa, I think you should pursue any matter relating to the abuse of state resources, and I'm sure you'll begin to get some answers in that particular regard. And Honorable Swart, I want to agree with you. It's a point that I've just made. Let's move away from point scoring when it comes to the common good. All of us should be interested in avoiding a downgrade, because it is going to be a downgrade that impacts on every single South African, regardless of the color of the T-shirt that you wear. And it's about time that the DA in particular, but others as well, begin to distinguish, as I've said this a million times at this platform, between party political interest and national interest. And we just don't seem to be getting the maturity in this particular regard. The Honorable Fig had 8 minutes and regrettably didn't spend it well. He's looking for a long-term vision when we already have one. Maybe we must provide him with a copy. He's talking about resilience and leadership when we've adequately demonstrated that. He's talking about the gap between rich and poor, but his party's policies actually sponsor that gap being increased all the time. We are the ones who want to reduce the gap. We are the ones who want to improve the quality of life of South Africans. And the proof of the pudding is in the way in which we've allocated resources, particularly to the social wage. He says the social wage of 56.7% is too little. In fact, it's one of the highest in the world that he will ever find. So in conclusion, I don't have the time to respond to the rest of what he's saying. We do not have unsustainable debt. We are managing our deficit well. What we should all be focusing on is how do we inspire confidence in our economy? How do we stop shooting ourselves in the foot? How do we focus on providing new and creative answers, which is coming from this side of the House, on inclusive growth that will meet the requirements of all South Africans? I urge all of you to support the Appropriation Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, in light of Rule 76, I will now postpone the decision for the question for a later session. I will now suspend the proceedings until 14 hours and wish to remind members that consideration of votes and schedules to Appropriation Bill will be taken at 14 hours this afternoon. Thank you.